right now in this new economy is the time to choose yourself. And there's very few people I trust to give guidance on side hustles, on how to monetize content, and so on. One of those people is my good friend, Jon Morrow. He's been on my podcast, I've been on his podcast. So I'm going to tell you a new way that you could earn six figures just as a freelance writer. And I really think this is important. I reached out to Jon, have him on my podcast, and I really wanted him to talk about this. But also, I wanted to send people to his site. So there's a big shift happening in the writing world right now. Chances are you've heard magazines and newspapers, they're just struggling to stay alive. And many aren't even paying writers anymore. I used to work for all these newspapers. They're paying practically nothing now. But here's what you haven't heard: the money is not disappearing. It's just shifting into a new kind of work. And if you're willing to make that shift, and I know if you've been listening to this podcast, you are willing to make that shift, it's actually shocking how much money you can make. So my good friend, Jon Morrow, has been training writers how to do it. And he has students making six figures. I know this. I know them. They're all working from home and they work whenever it suits their schedule. This is no joke. It's a big opportunity. I called up Jon. I asked him to put together a free class to teach you about it. You can get the whole thing by going to smartblogger.com/James. That's smartblogger.com/James. I have to admit there's a catch. He's only going to give away free access for the next couple of days. But if you're intrigued by the idea of doing freelance writing work, go there now and grab your spot at smartblogger.com/James. All the time people ask me, James, if you were 22 years old coming out of this lockdown, what would you do to make a living? This is what I would do. And this is how I would do it. I would go to smartblogger.com/James. If you're there, say hi to Jon for me.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
It's okay to admit that life is difficult. It's okay to have some pain. It's okay to learn. It's okay to learn through failure in some cases. It's okay to talk about it. You don't have to be ashamed about it. It's okay to ask for help. I find vulnerability to be kind of the currency of freedom. So the more vulnerable you are, the more actually you're able to write about things that you care about. So if I'm able to admit to things that not a lot of people are admitting to, I'm suddenly free to admit to these things compared to everyone else who can't admit to them. And so, all of these things together help to build, what we've been calling a personal brand, but really what we're calling a life story. It requires the time needed to experiment a lot, and the openness to experiment a lot, and the fearlessness to experiment a lot. You have to be fearless to try to write a story that you're really scared to publish.
Yep. So, here's what's really interesting to me. People have all different kinds of reasons for sharing their stories. And, one of the things that you just talked about is vulnerability. And you've been incredibly vulnerable about all the ways you've screwed up in life.
Yeah. Too much so, maybe.
Well, what is your motivation? Or why did you start? Why do you do it now? When you're afraid to click publish, what is it that gets you over that fear?
This episode is a very special one to me. The guy I'm talking to is a good friend of mine. He's paralyzed from the neck down. He has been from birth. He's overcome all of these challenges. He actually made millions of dollars. And in order to do so, he had to actually take the risk of giving up his medical benefits from the government. He had to move to Mexico so he can make money on his own and reject the medical benefits. And then he began his path to making millions. I've talked to him before about this, and he's just a genius at monetizing content, blogs, newsletters. In this episode, we reverse the tables a little bit. He asks me more questions about how I built up, and it was great hearing questions from his very unique perspective. He's just such a valuable resource. This is my good friend, Jon Morrow. He's a hero to me and an inspiration. Enjoy the podcast.
What I'd like to talk about is give some advice to people that are wanting to start a personal brand.
It's so interesting when you ask like how to start a personal brand. Like, Jon, let me ask you this just real briefly. Like, when you think of a brand, what's the first brand that comes to mind? Like a big company brand, for instance.
It is. And I read your post on this and I wanted to ask you about it. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
you mentioned Coke was like the
like
one that came to mind for you.
right. When I think about the Coke brand, I think these great commercials, like I'd like to bring the world to Coke. I think all these pictures of people having a party, drinking Coke, and that's not really a drink of liquid. That's a party. It's a video about a party. And so I always am uncomfortable with the word brand because it feels like a way of trying to tell people you're something that you aren't. So to persuade them to buy something that's not quite honest. So instead of saying, hey, we're just a great tasting drink, they say we're also, if you drink Coke, you're going to have lots of friends and have a party all the time. And so when it comes to personal brand, I always think it's really important to just be as authentic as possible, to make sure that whatever it is you're saying about yourself matches who you really are. And, presumably you might have some vision of what's important to you in the world. Like you might say, well, giving back and being charitable is important to you. And so I want to really express that in my message about who I am and in the articles I write and in the life I lead and the life I demonstrate to my children and readers and so on. So that might be something that's really important to you. But which is what I feel is what a personal brand should be and what I hope it is. But at the same time, I feel a lot of people focus on that word personal brand to basically express, well, I'm not sure yet who I am, but I want to be popular with my blogs. So I better start saying, well, I think Bernie Sanders is this. And it doesn't come across as authentic. Or I think you should work really hard in entrepreneurship and you'll have a happy life. When that might not be true, or you might not have enough experience to know, but you want to be a personal coach. So you're building a coaching brand, even if you might not know everything yet about what it takes. So it's really two questions. One is, what is your personal brand? What do you feel really strongly about? What do you have a mission about? So when I started writing pretty heavily, I mean, I've been writing all along, but when I started writing for a more general audience, I started telling my stories that, hey, I had some success in life. I was an entrepreneur. I'm still an entrepreneur. I do a lot of different things, but I've also really failed and I've really gone through my own set of hard times. I mean, we all have, and Jon, I know you've gone through really intense experiences, and so more than anyone really what I'm saying, and that it's okay to admit that life is difficult, that it's okay to admit that you need to come up with ways, more than knowing what the best investment is or the best way to make money or whatever. It's okay to have some pain. It's okay to learn. It's okay to learn through failure in some cases. It's okay to talk about it. You don't have to be ashamed about it. It's okay to ask for help. And so these were messages. And by the way, it's also okay to realize nobody else is going to help you if you don't help yourself. No one's going to help someone who's always a victim. They're going to help someone who they know is helping themselves and is a good person and is a kind person and is taking care of their relationships, their physical health, their creativity, their spirituality. So these were kind of messages that were important to me personally because it was the way I was living my life. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of building this message and getting this message out, the key is to be a good storyteller. So I don't just say, here's the 3 ways to build a business, because who am I to tell anybody how to build a business? I have to establish that through storytelling. I have to say, well, when I was building a business, the first thing that happened was I didn't want to build a business. I wanted to be a writer and I accidentally got into it. And then this, and this happened. And these customers treated me really bad. And I didn't know what to do because I didn't know anything about business. And then I made these other mistakes. And then finally, blah, 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 and you tell a story that has a beginning and a middle and an end, and you hopefully get better and better at storytelling. And what people really relate to, not just now, not just on social media, but through all history, is how good a storyteller you can be. So when I first started writing, people were like, why is this guy writing about this? I would get calls, James, are you about to kill yourself? Or do you have a disease? One CEO who I knew her very well. She called me. It's like, I heard you had a brain aneurysm and you're really sick. And I'm like, why? How'd you hear that? Like, that's, it's not true at all. But people, if you're telling a good, unique story, people don't even know how to react at first, but they do know it's you. So it got to the point where I could write something and people would say in the comments, without even reading who the author was, I knew this was James Altucher. And it just builds from there. So that's one approach is storytelling. And there's so many ways to practice it. One way I'm always in a state of learning. I learned, John, from your blogs and your posts about storytelling, but there's many ways, people should be readers, they should write every day and so on. But then the other thing is, don't be afraid to do many things. So I write for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 different websites. I do a podcast. I express my message. I'll take an article that I wrote on LinkedIn and I'll summarize the bullet points and I'll make a graphic and I'll put it on Instagram. Sometimes I'll jump around in a 15-second video and make my points and I'll put it on TikTok. And I also have a podcast where I express my ideas, and I'm very interested in learning and how to be a better person. So I'll interview other people who are my heroes and who I'm a fan of. John, I interviewed you for my podcast, and I've been doing this for 6 years. And so this is what I call the spoken wheel approach. So the wheel is at the core. That's where your personal vision is of how your life is and how the things you feel really important about, really strongly about. That's the wheel. But a wheel has spokes that goes out to let's say the tire in a bicycle or whatever. And each spoke is a different way of expressing your vision of the world. So it might be writing is one spoke. It might be books. Writing blog posts is one spoke. Writing books is another spoke. Making a podcast is another spoke. Making TikTok videos or YouTube videos is another spoke. Doing public talks, doing coaching. All of these things are spokes of that wheel to help you express that internal core vision. Having a core point of view about the world and how your life is and how people's lives could be better is that wheel. And then the spokes are all the different ways of expressing it. And the better you get at expressing it through storytelling and through mastering each part of these media, the better you'll get at building what we've been calling a personal brand.
So you've said so many different interesting things here that I'd like to break down.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the first thing is even the definition of a personal brand or an influencer. I mean, it sounds like your definition of what people should aspire to if they want to get into this is sharing authentic stories in a very human way that benefit other people.
Right. And so can I add to that?
Sure.
I think everybody should get into this. And I don't necessarily mean everybody should think, oh, I'm going to be an Instagram influencer and a YouTube influencer or make a lot of money doing this. But I think everybody should think about, what are my core values? What do I feel really, really strongly about? And they'll be surprised at their answers. Like, I'll give you an example. Climate change is a very important issue. It's an issue a lot of people feel very strongly about. I have opinions about it. I want the world to be a cleaner place and so on. Mm-hmm. But for me also, my family is very important. People who have gone through similar experiences to me, like, financial grief and pain and suffering, like that's very depressing. Like, suicidal ideation, depression, these things are very important to me. And while I don't think I can make really a big difference in climate change, I do think I can make a difference through my storytelling and through my writing and my personal experiences in helping people, or at least having people hear the stories of what I've been through. That's where I feel I can make a contribution. So although I have opinions about climate change and I live those opinions in my life, it's not something I'm going to write about all the time and think I can make a difference. So when you have a real strong core point of view, that's where you'll really be able to make a difference, and you'll have more stories to tell as well.
So that's based on experience,
Yes.
what I hear you saying.
Yeah, experience. And it's also, and you get experience. So people might say, well, how do you get experience? You get experience by doing things. So you got to try and do lots of things. And that's how you figure out, and it's not about, you realize pretty quickly, it's not about success or failure when I try things. These are experiments. So there's the famous story, Thomas Edison, he was inventing the light bulb. He tried 10,000 different types of wires to conduct electricity. And on the 10,000, none of them worked. 9,999 didn't work. And on the 10,000th wire that he was trying, it worked. So does that mean the first 9,999 failed? No, because he learned something on each time, and that allowed him to ask himself, what went wrong? What went right? What can I learn from this? And that eventually helped him create the first light bulb. So it's everything you do is an experiment, and then you kind of catalog and see, well, how did that experiment work? How did it feel to me? Did I enjoy it? Did I learn something? Did I get my goals? Were my goals even correct to have? Like maybe my goals changed mid-experiment, and if my initial goals failed, well, what worked? What succeeded? I find when I think that way, I never actually fail at anything. I just learn and learn and learn. And that's the key thing.
One of the things that you're keying in on here that I think is really interesting is that having those experiences, having those core values, having those things that you want to share with the world is almost like a prerequisite for becoming someone who can be influential, that can actually create that change.
Yes, because, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But it also feels like that a lot of people who are saying that they want to build personal brands and saying they want to become influencers, they don't have any experience.
Yes.
It's almost like, I think I read an article by Mark Manson the other day who said he's had doctors and lawyers come to him and say they want to quit their practices to become an influencer. And he's like, why? And they say, well, I just get on social media and I share my views. And every time I get a like or a comment, I just love it. And he's like, people are talking about changing careers based on just likes and comments.
Likes and comments. And so what they're really getting addicted to is they're getting a much stronger dopamine hit, like this weird kind of almost cocaine kind of excitement when someone likes something they say. Because maybe it's a validation they haven't experienced before. Like we all in life want our mommy and daddy to tell us we did a good job. And that's essentially, social media has kind of replaced that a little bit, and it feels good. And so we want more of it. And it feels so good. We think, oh my God, this is what I love doing. So I want to change my entire life. I want to throw away the 20 years I've been a doctor saving lives so I can get more Instagram likes. And you're right, it doesn't really work like that, because again, you have to build up. You have to experience things. You have to tell stories. You have to tell stories that more and more people start to say, hey, I want more of those stories. That was great. Can you give me more of that? And it's a process. It's not like you're going to get 1 million followers day one. And I'm not even so sure anymore the value of a follower. Like nobody has ever come, like I have Instagram followers and I put up Instagram posts, but nobody has ever come up to me and said, James, your Instagram page has changed my life. Like never. No, that's never happened to me. But they do say, hey, I really like that podcast you did with Jon Morrow, or I really like that podcast you did with Richard Branson. And it really made me think, and it really made me kind of see how I was doing things either wrong or right in my life or my business or whatever. And it really inspired me. Or they might say that about an article that I've spent maybe a month on, where I really put thought into it, into the stories that I want to tell, into the deeply personal things that happened to me that I'm willing to share. So here's another important thing. You have to ask what's unique about you. And I find that a lot of people, they'll write the same sorts of articles. And people, like if you want likes on Instagram, here's what you could do. You could put up a photo of yourself, and in the photo, you could say, hey, gratitude is 10 times better than eating carbs. And a lot of people are going to like that all of a sudden. But it doesn't really tell a story. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not something that people could apply, and they're not going to suddenly say, oh, I was about to eat pasta, but now I should be grateful instead. Like, they're not going to do that. So, again, it's when you say things that no one else is saying. Like, no one else was writing about business failure when I was writing about it. Nobody else was writing about, hey, I had to feed my 2 kids. I was broke after, and everyone was thinking I was super successful, and I was so ashamed of what had happened, and I was losing my home, losing my family. How am I going to bounce back from this? No one was saying that. No one was being so kind of saying these embarrassing things. I don't even hit publish on an article until I'm afraid of what people will think about me. And then, because then I know that I'm saying something unique. If I'm even afraid to publish this, I know no one else has published something like this, because otherwise I would have said to myself, oh, well, so-and-so did it, so it must be okay. Instead, I'm afraid every time I hit publish. And I think that's a good guideline for me, because it shows me where they always say no story is original. Every story is related to stories for other stories for thousands of years. And yet you could tell stories in original ways, and people can feel things, and you could help people to feel things depending on your mastery of the medium, whether it's podcast or YouTube or writing a book or whatever. And then you could say things in a unique way. You could say unique stories. You could be vulnerable. I find vulnerability to be kind of the currency of freedom. So the more vulnerable you are, the more actually you're able to write about things that you care about. So if I'm able to admit to things that not a lot of people are admitting to, I'm suddenly free to admit to these things compared to everyone else who can't admit to them. And so, all of these things together help to build what we've been calling a personal brand, but really what we're calling a life story. Like you're giving your story first. It's not a career choice. It's a personal and artistic choice to give of your story, and to be unique, and to be vulnerable, and to share with people because you want them to hear your stories. And it might be because you're altruistic, you want to help them, or it might be just because you want to tell your story, which is just as valid. If they like your story, you'll know it. And I agree with you. A lot of times people say, okay, well, here's how I learned about leadership. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But again, why are you on a pedestal telling me about leadership? I want to hear the stories where you learned the hard way about leadership. Like I remember one time I was the CEO of a company that I had started, and I was such an introvert and so shy that I used to call my secretary before I went upstairs, and I would say to her, is anybody in the hallway? And if she said no, I would rush upstairs, I'd get in my office, and I'd lock the door because I just didn't want to talk to anybody. And I was so terrified to talk to people. So I was like a horrible leader. And it's through experiences like that bit by bit, I realized, oh my God, that's why everybody quit, or that's why I couldn't raise any more money, or that's why this went out of business. I couldn't get any customers because I was a horrible leader. And well, then I tried this and it was a little better. So I started to get a little better at leadership, but not that much. And on and on. There's a story.
Yep. So, here's what's really interesting to me. People have all different kinds of reasons for sharing their stories. And one of the things that you just talked about is vulnerability. And you've been incredibly vulnerable about all the ways you've screwed up in life.
Yeah. Too much so, maybe.
Well, what is your motivation? Or why did you start? Why do you do it now? Like, when you're afraid to click publish, what is it that gets you over that fear to actually do it?
That's a great question, because on the one hand, the motive could be altruistic, but I'm not arrogant enough to think people really need to hear my story right now. Like, for me, a lot of it is I always wanted to be a writer. And I've been writing since I was a kid. I write every single day. It's probably the one thing in my life I've done most consistently. Even, I don't know. You know what it really is? I really thought I was kind of had various personal issues, and I was insecure. I was not a good looking guy. I was not social in parties. And I really thought maybe if I write and people like my writing, they'll like me, both men and women. I'll have more friends and people will actually like me.
Yeah.
And so I decided I'm going to get really good at writing. And so a lot of it is I just want to write a good story. And writing a good story involves being vulnerable, actually having something to say that's new and different and unique and has a beginning, middle, and an end, and share something in a way that touches people. That was important to me.
Yep. I mean, I admire there that you talk about too that it's just something you wanted to be, and even something you believed. I believe more people would like me. I mean, my reasons. I was just thinking, what would my reasons be? I mean, it's changed over time. When I started, it was because I was broke, and I needed some way to try to make money, and people seemed to like what I wrote. So I said, maybe I can somehow turn this into an income, and I can get off on Medicaid and not have to be stuck in a nursing home somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And that was my motivation. It was purely selfish. It's just about survival.
I think that's a critical point because think about it. You, for social media, I don't like calling it social media. It started off as social networking, right? It was a way for us to one-on-one meet new people. So social, we're going to meet friends, and networking, it's one-on-one. I'm connecting with you. Now it's social media where it's somehow the media is connecting to everybody, and that's what it's turned into. But you're right. My first uses of social networking were to make friends and to be in a community. And I imagine for you it was similar and for vastly different reasons than for me. And and one way communication is important. The written word is how social networking started, whether it was texts or blogs or long form articles or whatever. And for me, it was really a way to start meeting people. The better I wrote and the more interesting things I had to say, the more people who would contact me and say, "Hey, do you want to chat? Do you want to meet? Do you want to be friends?" And I met a lot of people who are my friends to this day because of those initial writings and social networking and so on. I met you that way, and I'm always very grateful for what writing and social networking has given me. But it's never been because, well, if I do this, I could be famous and make a lot of money and be a coach to people, even though I've never really done anything in my life. Now it's gotten to the point where I have done a few things in my life and I'm a little bit older, but I still don't say, "Hey, listen to me," or "You'll be wrong." It's still storytelling, and people could take what they want from it. They could say, "Well, I buy into this, but I don't buy into that." Or, "Hey, James kind of screwed up enough. I'm not going to listen to him on this, but maybe I'll listen to him on these other things." And yes, you can make money. Getting to kind of the point of, well, what if you want to make money this way? Yeah, you can do it. And I have made money this way, but it never was the first goal. The first goal was getting good at this new artistic medium. And the way you do that is you tell a good story, you tell your personal story, you tell your vulnerabilities, you tell the things you're afraid of. And what happens is we're all kind of afraid of similar things in one form or other. That's why we're all the same species. That's the common human condition. We have different situations in our lives. We all have things that scare us. And we all have things that keep us up at night. And we all have things that we want, but we're not quite getting and we don't know why. And sharing my experience of that, people say, "Oh yeah, it's like he's reading my mind. It's like I've been through that." And I'm sure you get the same thing. And then people start to contact you. Then people start to listen to your podcast and start to listen to or read more of your writing. That feels pleasurable because you want to be an artist also, and you want to be a writer, and you want to connect with people, and you want to help people too. So, but you're right. It did start off selfish. I really just wanted people to read these stories I was writing and enjoy them.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is, I mean, over time it changes. I mean, there was a time where I got obsessed with the likes and the numbers.
Me too.
So nowadays, I don't really even pay attention. But what do you feel about that? Like when you see a post going viral or something, I mean, it still is hard not to just become addicted and sit there and hit refresh over and over again to see what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is that, these brain chemicals, the same chemicals that get activated if you take a drug like cocaine or Adderall or whatever get triggered when someone likes a Facebook post or an Instagram post or a LinkedIn blog. Like it's the exact same chemical. It's dopamine in the brain and it feels really good. And I think I did used to get too obsessed with that. Like, you get this sense, hey, I posted something 12 minutes ago. I should have 73 likes by now. Like you start to calculate in your brain the formulas of your rate of expansion of likes. And I had 100 or 1,000 followers yesterday. I should have 1,200 followers today. What's going on? Is the algorithm changed? Like, is Google screwing me or what's happening? But then after a while, you start to realize, and then there's another thing that's very important. If something does go viral, or if you see a lot of likes on something, you start to feel, well, should I write more like that? Instead of trying to experiment further and improve your skills further, if you let the audience dictate too much what you're producing, you become the audience instead of the producer, the creator. And so that's important to be aware of that. And look, we all have that problem, or at least I have that problem. I still have that problem. Like, I always have to check myself. Am I just writing this because I know this is what the audience likes, or is this what I really want to say right now in my life? And that's something I ask every day, and it's a challenge. And I always am thinking, well, what do I really want to say? What new things do I want to say? Or is there a new way I can tell an old story without seeming too repetitive? Because every event in your life could be told in 100 or 1,000 different ways. So you can tell the same story twice, but you just have to look at new ways to analyze it and new ways to tell it and so on. So, but here's the other important thing about likes and followers. I really don't think they're important anymore. Like, I think the value of a follower in every medium has gone down because I think algorithms have replaced followers in terms of who sees your content. So TikTok is a great example. I put a few videos up on TikTok just to experiment. There's no harm in experimenting with anything. So I wanted to experiment with this new social medium, TikTok. So I had 0 followers, of course. I just started. And I put up a couple of videos. Some of them did 0 views, which normally when you have 0 followers, they should all get pretty much 0 views. But 1 or 2 of them got like 100,000 views or 200,000 views. And I realized, it didn't really matter how many followers I had. The algorithm was taking over for a lot of this. And I see the same thing on a lot of blogging platforms like LinkedIn and Medium. I see a lot of the same things on Facebook and Instagram and, of course, on Twitter. So I don't think followers are really that important anymore. I think the algorithm has taken over, and the algorithm's determined by a little bit how good your content is, how many people are sharing it, how many people are commenting on it, how much you're engaged with it. So engagement has become a lot more important than followers, which is interesting also. Unless you have millions and millions of followers, in which case it's so much just the law of numbers, you're going to get some benefit from that. A lot of people, and I'm not talking about a lot write me asking about what is going on in this economy. What would you do, James, if you were just starting out? Everybody's been working remotely and there's so much uncertainty and so much craziness. How to make money in this crazy time. So I've been spending a lot of time each day looking at side hustles, calling up my friends who they have all the disadvantages you could imagine, and yet they still make a ton of money working at home, even in the case I'm about to describe, millions. So you might remember my friend, Jon Morrow. This guy has had a lot of disadvantages. He's had a hard life. I've been fortunate enough to call him friend, and I really just love this guy. He's been on the podcast. He's one of the most successful writers online. He figured out how to make 6 figures just from writing. In fact, if you know his story, he even had to turn down all the medical benefits that were being promised him because of the condition he's in. He's paralyzed from the neck down. He's had to turn away medical benefits while he was just getting started because he had so much confidence in his ability to make money online, but he couldn't make money from both sources. So he figured out how to make 6 figures just from his writing. Now he's teaching people all over the globe how he did it. I know many of these students. It works. Imagine being able to charge $5,000 per post. That's what Jon has figured out how to do, that and much more. I know this because I've been a columnist at the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, many other newspapers. That's more than we were all making. And now for a limited time, he's giving away a free class about how to do it. I encourage you, take the class while it's free. It's all about the new way to make six figures as a freelance writer, starting out making $200 a post and then scaling to $1,000 per post or beyond. You can get the whole thing, and you only get it for free by going to this URL. And this is because John and I are friends. We worked out this deal. Go to smartblogger.com/James. You got to use my name, smartblogger.com/James. That's smartblogger.com/James. I've seen the training. I know John. He is the most honest, sincere person you will ever meet. And this is a truly unique course. It's for free. Grab it while you can. smartblogger.com/James.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
So when you started out doing this, and even to this day, I mean, you're incredibly prolific on all the different social platforms. If you're a beginner and you have some stories and experiences and you want to go share those online, do you think social media is still a great way to get your content out there to people?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I write every single day. I used to post every single day, but then I now I don't. I'll post maybe like 2 to 4 times a week an article. And I used to do Instagram posts as much as possible, but now I've slowed that down a little bit. And I do 4 podcast episodes a week. So for me, I'm really this year has been about really kind of. I've been doing a podcast for 6 years, but now I'm really kind of, taking beginner's mind and just doubling down my efforts on producing podcast content and learning storytelling even better in a podcast context, because you're always a student. You're never the master, really. And so yeah, I'm prolific, but a lot of it is experimenting with different media. I never was a big YouTube person, and I love writing. It kind of saddens me a little bit that writing and blogging are not quite as popular as they once were, because consumption of videos and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube is so much greater. But that's why I'm doing a little bit more with podcasting. But so I think about all these things, and I think in terms of what people should start with, just whatever they enjoy. Like if they enjoy taking out a camera and talking to it, and they think that they have interesting things that nobody else is doing, do it on YouTube, do it on Instagram. TikTok, by the way, is a different type of creativity, because you have these music videos and things like that. It's kind of, there's some amazingly creative stuff that's happening on TikTok, just like there was creative stuff happening on Twitter when it first started, and even now. And there's always creative stuff with podcasting and with writing. There's always something new to say with writing. And so find the media, experiment. You can't know something until you do something. You can't think yourself into saying, hey, I'll be great on YouTube. There's no way to think this through. You have to do it. And so that's where experimenting and trying different things and learning from your failures and from your successes, this is really how you figure that out. The more experiments you do, the better your skills will be. And this is a very important thing. Like people say, there's this famous rule, the 10,000 hour rule, which people say is like, oh, if you do 10,000 hours of something, you'll be the best in the world at it. But the reality is, I don't think that rule is true. I think that rule is only true for very repetitive tasks. I prefer what I call the 10,000 experiment rule, where if you experiment 10,000 times on things you love and want to try and what to do, then you'll really be the best in the world at what you love doing. If I do 10,000 experiments with writing, I'm going to be an amazing writer, even better than I already am. I'm just going to be simply amazing. And it's all about experimenting and then learning from those experiments.
Yeah, it brings to mind one of the things I used to do when I first got started. I lived over top of a bar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
I didn't know that.
I was writing articles for a site called Copyblogger at the time, and I used to brainstorm headlines all day, and I used to write at least 100 headlines every day, and that's like 100 experiments.
Yeah, exactly.
But then what I would do is I would go down to the bar, and I'd sit there, and I don't even drink, but I would sit there and be reading them out loud to no one in particular. And I noticed some of the headlines when I would read them would get people to stop talking and turn around. And
Yeah.
I realized that's when I've got something. But that was the way I experimented.
So right. So you described two types of experiments. One is simply doing and writing different headlines. That's an experiment because you feel inside yourself, oh, I'm going to try writing this headline in the second person. I'm going to try writing this headline with an exclamation point. I'm going to try writing this headline all with lowercase letters. So those are all experiments, and you look at it and you become more expert, so you feel how it feels to you inside. And then what you did is you go into this bar, this kind of seemingly innocent place for experimenting, and you read out these headlines out loud, which, by the way, also is an experiment. When you read a piece of text out loud, it's different than reading it in your mind. You get to see how it rolls off the tongue. Does it make sense as dialogue, as conversation? Does it give you the feeling viscerally that you intended it to? But then it's like the whole bar was your focus group, which is by definition an experiment, and you get to see who reacts and who doesn't. So I used to post like articles on Facebook, and if I got more likes and more shares, I would say, that's interesting. Like if I took two articles and one got 3 shares and another got 300 shares, then later on when I was writing a book, I would rewrite the article that had 300 shares and make it, add more stuff, make it a little more interesting, because I knew that that was content that people related to. So if I included some version of that as a chapter in a book, I knew that it would hit it would primarily hit a large audience, as opposed to the thing that had 3 shares, which might have been something that was interesting to me or good writing to me, but it wasn't something that people really wanted to hear. So there was no need for me to include it in a book. And so focus grouping, using kind of what you have, the materials around you, what you have as a focus group to test out content for different uses is a very powerful technique, a very powerful experiment. By the way, very similar, look at the great religious texts of all time, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita from Hinduism or the Eightfold Path in Buddhism or the Bible in Christianity and Judaism. These are pieces of text that have been focus grouped by billions of people across thousands of years of history. So when you think about the stories that are popular now, like Star Wars, guess what? Almost beat for beat, it's the story of Jesus or Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, because these are stories that have been focus grouped over time. So if you take those same similar structures and apply it to science fiction, guess what? It's going to be popular. We know it's going to be popular because the same ideas have been popular for 3,000 years or 2,000 years. So it's another different approach to experimentation, which is how can I combine, let's say, the story of Jesus with science fiction to create a new story. That's an experiment, but it's an experiment that probably is gonna do very well.
So storytelling is one of those essential skills. Do you think there are any other essential skills people need to learn if they want to spread their message?
Yeah, I think having a point of view about your life and life in general, and having a point of view about your experiences and how you react to them. There's always that saying that who you are is not what you've experienced in life, but who you are is what you is how you've reacted to those experiences. And a lot of that comes from point of view, or some people call it mindset, but I like the word point of view a little better. or the phrase. But if everything that happens to you, you say, "Oh, something bad happening to me again," that's a point of view. If something bad happens to you and you say, "You know what? I'm gonna do my best in this situation, and then I'm gonna learn from what's happening," that's a different point of view. Or in politics, if you have a point of view that uh, everybody should have exactly equal opportunity all the time, no matter what their life experiences were before this. That's one point of view. If you have the point of view that, hey, we should live in a meritocracy, that's another point of view. And, over time, you build up this collection of point of views that become core to who you are. And that gives you a voice, a real voice to speak. If you're always trying to please others, if you're always trying to pander to either fans or readers or family or friends or a boss, you don't have a real voice. You're kind of speaking with a weaker version of their voice, and you're trying to speak in a weaker version of their vocabulary. But instead, if you have your own point of view, you start to develop your voice, your very unique voice, and and then it's you having the party, and other people are invited to it, and you can speak from that core point of view. That doesn't mean you're better than anyone else. It just means you're you. You have a core point of view so like if I speak from my core point of view, and let's say, John, you disagree with something I'm saying, I'll be confident enough in what I'm saying that two things happen. One is I can address what you said. If you have concerns or if you disagree with me, I could address your concerns. Or I'm truly confident enough, I could maybe even change my mind because I'm confident that I'm speaking from a core inside of me that's me. So I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm not allowed to change my mind if I'm trying to please a million people, because I have to ask the million people first what they think. But if I'm speaking from my core, I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to say, John, that's a really great point. I didn't think of it that way. I'm going to start thinking of it that way, or I'm at least going to experiment and test that idea out. So I think it's really important not to just have storytelling ability, but to also have a core point of view that your storytelling will reflect. And, a great example in this, let's take a really topical example. Jeffrey Epstein. So this is an example. People really don't like to talk about this example because there's many horrifying things. There's pedophilia, there's a billionaire, there's an island that the rich and elite were going to for now what seems like these weird, perverse reasons, and then he goes to jail, and there's a mysterious suicide, and the camera didn't work, and blah, blah, blah. And so if my core point of view is, hey, I'm never going to trust the system, there's obviously a conspiracy that happened here, I'm going to ask, why did this happen? What might have happened? And so on. And you say to me, James, come on, it wasn't a conspiracy. All right, we maybe have different core points of view, but we can handle it if we're both sincere about what our beliefs are. So if I really think everything is a conspiracy and people are, there's always a real reason and a good reason. And the media gave me the good reason, but I want to find the real reason. This might be a legitimate point of view here. But again, if I'm just trying to I'm going to be a conspiracy theorist because I know a lot of people like to read about conspiracies, I won't really know how to analyze the situation. I won't really know how to understand what parts of this might be mysterious, what parts of this I should ask why about, what parts of this should I question and kind of connect the dots to all these, Prince Andrew and the presidents, the various presidents. Having a core point of view helps you figure out what the story really is. And it doesn't even matter what it is, what your core point of view is, as long as it's core to you and it's strong, you'll be able to tell a good story. If your point of view is not strong, then this is not an area where you can tell a good story, even if you have great storytelling ability.
That's one of the best descriptions I've heard of what
Thank you.
takes to tell interesting stories. So yeah, I really appreciate that, and I totally agree with you. By the way, I mean my point of view. One of the reasons why my writing has taken off online is because I have the point of view of a person who has, like, who can't move. And
Yeah.
so I have a totally different perspective on the world, and I talk about the way that I see things. And that's a totally interesting and unique point of view out there that you don't hear every day. And so it tends to fascinate people when I tell those stories.
Right. And your storytelling ability, it touches everyone. You're not just touching other people in a similar situation. You're able to kind of reach past the story. Again, using this point of view, which has given you a philosophy of life, you're able to reach past the story and find the areas of your perspective that a billion other people maybe could relate to. And that's valuable, a combination of valuable storytelling ability and a very strong point of view and sense of self. And it doesn't happen naturally. It happens through doing things, through writing over and over again, and going through that experience of, reloading for the likes, and hey, should I write another story that I think the audience will like, and on and on and on. It's just, I'm not going to say it requires the 10,000 hour rule, because I don't believe that, but it does require some time. It requires the time needed to experiment a lot, and the openness to experiment a lot, and the fearlessness to experiment a lot. You have to be fearless to try to write a story that you're really scared to publish, because you're trying this one experiment. You're going to talk about yourself in the third person. You're going to admit to this horrible thing that happened to you when you were 11 years old. And there's a certain fearlessness trying these experiments, no matter what the results will be. But that's how you learn to be a better writer, a better storyteller, have a stronger point of view, and ultimately to be a better human.
And it seems like those things are also what lead people to trust you, to feel like they know you, and to actually start to create the real influence where people not only listen to what you have to say, but take what you have to say very seriously.
Absolutely. Because it's like I said before, vulnerability is kind of like you give vulnerability for freedom. So, but it's also you give for related to freedom is trust. Okay, people are you have freedom about what you're saying, because now people trust that they're in good hands when they're reading one of your stories. They're in good hands when they buy into your point of view, and they're willing to go along for the ride. Vulnerability is how you quote unquote buy those things. That's the currency of freedom and trust. Nothing else is, by the way. If you give all the wisdom in the world, it is not the currency of trust. It's just you lecturing the world. But if you tell a story, it's you trading with people. It's you interacting in this great social mesh that we're all a part of, and we're all just trying to survive for as long as we can. And we're trying to have a good health span, a good lifespan, and a good happy span. How many years of our life can we be as happy as we can be?
And I mean, just to kind of wrap us up, I mean, the one last topic I want to touch on is, I mean, you generate that influence. You have these shared experiences with people. They start to take what you're doing very seriously. A lot of people then, I mean, you monetize it in some way. For me, it's mostly been courses, classes. For you, it's newsletters.
Yeah, by the way, monetization is also a spoke and a wheel. So the way people know you, let's say, or the way people know me, is through writing and podcasting, and maybe some television experiences that I've done. And so that's the wheel. That's how I've created content that people can see and observe in the world. But then you have spokes. So one way to monetize is newsletters. Another way to monetize is books. Another way to monetize is creating a TV show. Another way I monetize is other investors know they can trust me, so they invite me to participate in their financial opportunities. So the bulk of my income has really come from investing, because people trust me to be in their deals, and I get opportunities as a result, and I'm very grateful for that. So there's with monetization, there's also this spoken wheel. Almost with everything you do in life, with every philosophy you have, with every approach you do, with everything you want, there's some sort of there's a core, there's this wheel, and then there's spokes of how to either monetize it or create more or experiment more or share more or be charitable and so on.
So yeah, would you say that, I mean, for you, was that spoken afterthought, or was it something that you thought about from the beginning?
I think it was afterthought. I really did not know what would happen because once again, like you can't think you can't think your way into knowing what happens. People are very bad at that. They don't really know what nobody knows what the future is. And we make the mistake of thinking we do. We make the mistake of thinking, "Oh, I'm smart. I can figure this out." But the reality is it's very hard to do. It's very hard to know what's going to work and what's not, which is why experimenting is important. And trying new things, trying new experiments, trying new ideas. And again, I'm glad I realized that. I wouldn't have realized that unless I had been through it. So, again, once again, you can only do things. You can't think your way to results. You could only do your way to results.
Well, and one of the things I think would be fair to say, I mean, in your case, and maybe even in my case too, because of all of the trust you built up with so many people over time, as long as you were selling them something they were interested in, you now had the influence with them that they would give it a try.
Yes, and you make a good point. You got to be sincere about what you're selling. You gotta have a reason why you're selling this, and you're not just trying to selling out is when you take all of this trust that you built up with an audience and you do this one-time transaction where you lose all the trust, but you make enough money that you think is enough to live forever. So that's a horrible way to do it. The key is you're not selling out if you're selling. And the way you continue selling is you're selling something of value and you're selling something that's helping people and you're selling something that is sincere and you're honest about. And, that works. And again, I've learned that through experience and through, the hard way. It's much nicer to make your money in private, but sometimes when you make your money in public, like with a newsletter, it's very easy for people to criticize and judge. You learn and you learn and get better at dealing with things and creating things, and hopefully it all works out in the end.
Well, for you, it's worked out very well. I mean, you've built a huge company around what you do. And I mean, I looked at your website. You have a ton of newsletters now, all
Yeah,
different kinds of things.
yeah,
So,
yeah. A lot of it's like financial related because I used to write. My initial writing was all about like finances and stocks and stuff. But I hated writing about that for the general public because I didn't feel that's what people needed. Nobody's life is going to change knowing what stock to buy or knowing when to buy Apple stock. But I did see that a lot of people were buying stocks anyway, and they weren't doing it right. And I had a lot of experience in this, so I wanted to help people, but I didn't. And I wanted to write, but I didn't want to write for everybody on this topic like I used to. So, how I did it became, through a newsletter, so that it kind of created a barrier, so it became different from my usual writing. And yes, it was a way to monetize it.
so I mean, that is, I mean, I think one of the big success stories online for people who have, I mean, there are so many people out here who have built fairly large followings, but they haven't monetized it in any
Yes.
way. Or either they can't figure it out, or they discover they don't have any real influence. Is sometimes the key, the case.
Right. Yeah. Because the whole, again, I think this is because the whole notion of a follower has changed. You're right. And so people who have even lots of followers, they actually don't really have any followers. Followers don't mean anything.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the example I've run into several times is, I mean, any girl can get a whole bunch of followers on Instagram if she takes a whole bunch of butt pics
Yeah.
and puts them up on Instagram.
Right. Like if she takes off her clothes, she's getting followers.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean she has any influence. There's probably no brand that will then come to her unless it's like a pornography brand or something.
Right.
That will say, okay, we want you to endorse this product or whatever it is, because no influence is actually being created in that case.
Right. And you could see that. Like the advertisers, advertisers are fairly intelligent about this. They're not going to spend money on things where they're not going to sell products. And so, sometimes I'll go to a podcast I'm familiar with and I'll say, hey, what do you charge for an advertisement? And I'll see that mine's very different from what I charge. And it's because people, again, relate to, because I have I don't know how to describe it, like a high demographic audience, meaning, maybe my audience is filled with people who are interested in financial stuff, or maybe my audience tends to be filled with book buyers. So whatever it is, it helps me to have built a lot of trust with the audience, and I'm very happy about that.
So are there any key pieces of wisdom? We've talked about so many different things here. And just to close up, I want to give you the opportunity. If you were going to say anything else to someone who, let's say they are doing the right type of writing creation. Let's say they really do have a strong point of view and super interesting stories, and they're going to use social media, they're going to experiment, they're going to figure out what the right channel is for them, and they're going to tell all of those stories and help lots of people. Are there any final words of wisdom you'd like to give to that person?
Yeah, I would say every day write. And maybe you're not yet a good writer, which is normal. Not everybody's a good writer right away, but every day experiment. Like come up with ideas, be creative. And I always tell people, get a little pad, like a waiter's pad, and write 10 ideas a day. And people ask me, well, do they have to be good ideas? Are they business ideas? Do I keep the ideas? No. Just write 10 simple ideas. It could be about anything. And you're just exercising the idea muscle. So the idea muscle, it's like any other muscle you have. It'll atrophy when you don't use it. And so you just want to come up with ideas that exercises the muscle. And I always tell people, and this is true, was true for me and it's true for a lot of people I know, after 6 months, you'll actually notice you're an idea machine. You're just like bursting with ideas all the time. And it's amazing. It's like a superpower. And once you start doing that, and again, people say to me, well, are they business ideas? Do you keep track? No, because you're exercising the idea muscle. So as it gets better, you're going to come up with better and better ideas, and you'll start to know, okay, you'll have the experience. Okay, I think I just came up with a good idea. And then people say, well, ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is everything. That's not true, because practicing that idea muscle is very important. So you're creative. Like any business starts off as a simple idea, but you have to get your idea muscle has to be good to come up with good ideas. Most idea muscles are atrophied. And then the second thing is execution. Execution ideas are just a subset of ideas. So I know people who are good at executing, and I know people who are bad at executing. And the difference is the quality of their execution ideas. So I always tell people, when some idea excites you, okay, next day maybe write down, here's 10 execution ideas. And then each execution ideas should be easy to try, and so you don't have to spend too much time in any one idea, so you could test easily whether the idea is going to work or not. And I do this all the time. I have ideas all the time, which I test out. By the way, almost all of them are really bad ideas.
Yeah.
But that's how I learn. I come up with ways to test out, okay, is this good or bad? And then I find out very quickly, okay, that was bad. I did some execution ideas and it turned out that was bad. And some ideas have nothing to do with business. Sometimes I'll write down 10 ideas for LinkedIn, and then I might send them to LinkedIn. And lo and behold, I'll get invited to LinkedIn and hang out for a day with whoever. So I've been to LinkedIn, I've been to Facebook, I've been to Google, I've been to Twitter, I've been to Amazon, I've been to Quora, all because of just sharing ideas with them. And some good, some bad. Or I had an idea the other day for a game. So the next day I wrote all the rules for the game. I spec'd out how I would execute the game, how I would do it. And I still haven't spent any time or money making the game, but I'm half the way there just because I've done, this ideation and come up with execution ideas and so on. Now I know what to do next. And I keep taking bit by bit, keep taking small steps. Or I might come up with an idea list that has nothing to do with business. 10 good ideas if I was for a first sentence, if I was writing a novel. And that just might be a way to be creative. And I'll never, ever write those ideas down again because I'm not doing a novel, so I have no use for that idea list. And so that's something I think is very important. To practice exercising your idea muscle is very important. And that's also how you develop a stronger and stronger point of view.
Yep. Not everything you generate is going to be good or you're even going to do anything with. But if you're not generating new ideas, you have nothing to give people.
Exactly. And by the way, most ideas will be really bad. Like that, and that's the thing you learn really quickly, which is a valuable thing to learn. Like most people, when they come up with an idea, they think, oh my gosh, this is my big idea. This is going to be great. But actually, most ideas that even seem really great are really bad. And that's why being good at coming up with execution ideas is a good way to test that quickly.
Did you know that franchise owners are more likely to start a successful business than entrepreneurs who go it alone? Neighborly offers 19 premier brands with services that repair, maintain, and enhance homes. With Neighborly, you'll get the business model, marketing resources, and corporate support you need to pursue a rewarding future. Learn more about joining over 5,000 Neighborly franchises by downloading your free guide at go.nbly.com/podcast.